Hello, everybody, and welcome to Virtual Homesteading. We're so glad that you could join us. For folks on YouTube who are watching later, we're really excited you're here today. And we are here with the fantastic Alexia from Hawthorn Farm, who is an incredible educator. We've been working together on this homesteading series with Hawthorn Farm for many, many months, including all through 2020. Awesome virtual classes from so many topics that cover sustainable living, from truly seed to harvest to soil, and cooking to fermentation, and all that goes into maintaining a regenerative homestead. So I definitely encourage you to check out our other classes with Hawthorn Farm. And they're on our YouTube and virtual events page. But yeah, we're excited to have you here today to observe nature and get closer to the cycles that keep us going, and how to work with them best as a regenerative organic gardener and or farmer slash homesteader, which is just an amazing feat. So yeah, we're really excited to have you here, and I wanted to give an introduction to 21 Acres for folks who may not know about 21 Acres. We are a living laboratory and education center and farm, which serves to educate our community around climate change and how to participate in climate action by promoting and building resilient food systems that are rooted in agroecology, regenerative farming, sustainable land stewardship, and adopting sustainable building and living practices. And I'd like to also give a land acknowledgement to where we are situated. 21 Acres and Hawthorn Farm are both located in Woodinville, Washington, and these are the ancestral lands of Indigenous nations, including the Stillaguamish tribe, as well as the Duwamish and Coast Salish peoples. And we acknowledge these nations and people as the original stewards of this land. We want to honor them and the land itself. And we really appreciate how you're learning how to take care of this land for future generations, which is just even more paramount day by day. Thank you so much. And looks like we have an awesome guest. Thank you for joining. So Alexia, I will give it to you. Thank you so much for being here.
It is a pleasure to be here today, Rhianne. Thank you so much. And thanks to 21 Acres for inviting me to speak on homesteading and on this topic in particular. These are really some of my passions. And when I think about nature observation for the home gardener, it really is an extension of childhood passions. Think about it. Did you ever play in the dirt as a kid? Like, did you ever really want to catch bugs and look at them and have so much fun pouring water down a little ditch that you dug in the soil and having it, make a mud puddle at the other end? Those child's passions, that like pulling leaves off of plants and smushing them into a bucket of water and making potions, making mud pies, those passions, when you just extend them over years, naturally make you an awesome gardener. So when I talk about nature observation for the home gardener, I'm really tapping into those child's passions and just bringing some years of experience to that. It's really fun. Like what I'm doing, observing my place and looking around at how things are growing and how the shadows are falling and where the water is and where the warm places are and where the cool places are during the day. This is all natural and fun, and it can be done anywhere. Like if you're gardening in a windowsill, if you're gardening on a big, a giant ranch, like if you're in a forest, there's always something to observe. And I've worked with students of natural history over many years. I was an instructor for the Kamana Naturalist Training Program, which is a natural history correspondence course, for 12 years. And I saw work from students all over the world. I mean, people like on rooftops in Manhattan are watching the stars and the clouds and the weather and the different smells that come on the wind that tell them what part of the city, and getting to know the lives of the pigeons in the middle of the city. Like there's just fascination everywhere we look. And when we use that observation for whatever soil we're tending, the results are pretty delicious. And certainly over the years, myself and other people in the Nature Connection world, I've heard one of my mentors, John Young, talk about his New Jersey relatives who are like, nature, huh? You're really into nature. I'm not into nature. And he's like,
but little do they know they're in it. We always
no, I'm like, do you eat? If you're not in, like, so what do you eat then? Or like, well, what planet are you from if you're not into nature? Because all of us rely on these natural processes in order to live. Like, there's just no actually removing us from the ecological context that we're all part of. And I mean, this is not a new idea. I remember taking a college course from my fantastic mentor, Renee Goddard, at the college I went to. And there was a class on like environmental problems and solutions. And so she asked us all, what's the biggest environmental problem in your view? And all of us, 19-year-olds are there like, oh, it's pollution, it's overpopulation, it's, this, that, and the other, whatever the latest thing we had read about. And finally it comes around to her and she says, the biggest environmental problem is a lack of connection. It's that people aren't aware of what's around them and they don't feel connected. Because when we feel connected, naturally we look for solutions and we make sure that we're treating the world right around us when we're connected to and loving the world. So that really, that's stuck with me for decades now. Wow. Yeah, connection is an answer to this. And how do you connect with anybody, with anything, with any place? You spend time with them. You spend time observing and just being with that place. And in 1999, I went to a wilderness survival class where I met a bunch of people from a school called Wilderness Awareness School, and they had us go out and sit in the woods, sit at the same place every day. And I was like, wow, I'm not really going to practice a lot of wilderness survival skills in my day-to-day life, but I can go sit somewhere every day and just notice what's happening. Be like, hey, here I am, world. I'm showing up. Like, I don't know what you got for me, but there's like something is happening, and I'm just going to do my best to expand my admittedly limited human senses and try to just connect with what's really happening around me. Like, what direction is the wind coming from right now? Where is the sun? What's the moon phase? When do I think it's going to rain next? These are bits of reality that have nothing to do with my own ideas and concepts of what should happen. Mm-hmm. But it sure is what the plants in your garden are paying attention to. Do they care about your ideas? No, they care about when it's actually going to rain. Mm-hmm. So when I can enter into the reality that the plants are living in, I'm going to be a much better gardener. Absolutely. And that can come about through play, through those childhood passions of like, whoa, what bug is this? Oh my God, that bug's eating this other one. Or like, oh no, the snails just ate my baby squash. Like, there's an emotional and a joyful connection with that. And then as we become adults, we can bring some discipline and diligence to it. Like, I remember what happened last year with the slugs. I can do something about that next time. I've noticed that I cannot grow peas here unless I fence the rabbits out. I know that there are rabbits in the neighborhood. I see them. Mm-hmm. I see all my little pea plants mowed off at a sharp angle with those chompy little bunny teeth. Okay.
Like, so then you just are able to keep the longer we're able to observe, and it's really nice to see, I feel like, one area at a time. Like, my neighbor just bought a house next door to us, and they're a landscape family, and they have these beautiful plants, but they're like, we're not planting anything for at least a year because we want to see exactly what happens here and what bugs and what's the soil like. And that made me really excited because they had all these trees for a while, and I was like, struck up a conversation like, hey, when are you going to plant these trees? And they're like, slow your roll. we're, we're gonna do this the conscious way, which
Mhm.
I guess, well, they must have rushed into it at one point and were
Mhm.
sorely disappointed with the result. Yeah. Oh man,
Yes.
I also love how you connected childhood, just curiosity and the true and inventive spirit of children and of all of us as we enter this world, just like, what's going on here? I need to touch
Mhm.
it. I want to know. And why is it that we all make potions? Like, what? Always, everyone's a witch. Everyone, it's so great. I love it. I made many a mud pie. And speaking,
Yes.
okay, I did have a
Mhm.
question. Speaking of witchy things,
Yes.
so the moon phase, you mentioned the moon, and we are at the new moon in for tropical zodiac people. We are in the new moon of Cancer season. So the sun is right in that line with the moon and the earth.
Mm.
What happens right around now for plant world, for at least in your world?
You got to ask the plants,
Yeah.
really. Yeah. I'll touch in a little bit on the kind of weather and moon and some of the stuff that I've noticed and a few sort of additional resources. I mean, for sure, there is more going on than I will ever be able to know.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's that much I can tell you for sure. And then I'll talk a little bit about some of the specific things that I've noticed at my latitude with sun and moon and why it's important to know about those. Um, so I'll show you also my journals, just kind of the things, I have stacks and stacks. I have stacks upon stacks of decades of journaling about my place. And do I always refer back to them? No, but the process of journaling has been super helpful. I do have some basic garden notes, like here's what I did with my tomatoes in 2019, so there are ways to keep some basic notes, and that's a good idea. Just don't get bogged down in the note taking. Daniel, my husband Daniel, has done a project of marking some of the fence posts with flagging, and then he goes and he takes a picture right from that fence post every week, or the same view of the garden. So then you just put them together and do this groovy little time lapse, of what the gardens look like over the year. And it's great to have some kind of record of what happens. I can't remember everything that's been happening here over the past 17, plus years that I've been gardening. So whatever record keeping that serves and you can stick with, great. That's something else that I would encourage. One of the things, and perhaps an easy way to do it, I just take a seed catalog and, I have kind of marked in here all the different varieties that I've grown, and I just circle them on the page, and then I make a little note like, this parsnip was way better than the other one. Okay, well, now I know. And then these are easy to just store on my shelf. I'm pretty darn analog, but there are lots of different ways to do it. I just put out a Hawthorn Farm garden journal that's on our website. It's been super fun. So that's specific for the summer. And whatever record keeping, whatever's going to age your memory over the years for whatever space you're gardening, that's great. Do what serves. That's a very personalized effect. As for plants, so moving into talking about plants specifically, they're the heavy lifters in your garden. Obviously, they're really the ones to get to know more deeply. And I recommend a couple of big categories to put plants in. And one of those is plant families. So plants are grouped into families, like strawberries and cherries and peaches are all related. They're all in the same family. And broccoli and cabbage and kohlrabi and cauliflower are all in the same family. And tomatoes and potatoes and eggplants and peppers are in the same family. So when you can understand certain families, that's an easy way to know more about them. And also, like, you instantly can recognize a mustard family flower because there are lots of weeds in the mustard family too. And you're like, oh, great. I know about this weed. I know a lot of things about it because I know it's a mustard, even if I don't know its individual name. So I we'll put this in the notes too. This is a book called Botany in a Day by Thomas Elpel. It's probably all backwards for you all, but Botany in a Day, fantastic book, grouped with all sorts of plants, grouped very practically by family, and kind of, learn these families first. So highly recommended in terms of a way to think. If you're like, where do I start learning about plants? Take a look at plant families. Another way to think about plants that's really important for us gardeners is the life cycle of the plant. Some plants are annuals. The seed gets planted at some point in the year, the plant grows, it makes a bunch of seed, and it dies within the span of 12 months. That's an annual plant. And a lot of the plants that grow in our gardens are annuals. A lot of the plants that we get at the grocery store are annuals. That, loaf of bread is made out of annual wheat, typically. So there are annuals, there are biennials that live for 2 years. And that also influences where the food is stored in the plant. The annual plant's like all about making seeds. We're like, make a bunch of leaves and then make a bunch of seeds and we're done. And biennial plants are like, well, we're going to store a bunch in this big root down here. That's going to be your carrots, your beets, your parsnips, a lot of things that store food in a root. They're storing it so that they can make flowers the next year. It's like, whoa, okay, there are these different plants with different life cycles.
It speaks to the importance of really understanding our seed collection. I did not realize that wheat was an annual, and I eat bread every day of my life. So the people who are also collecting and harvesting and replanting, just everyone thank your farmers really quick.
Yeah.
All of the farmers, we love you so
Seriously.
much.
And thinking about saving seed in the long, like thousands of years of careful association with plants in order to save seed from one generation to the next. It boggles my mind. And we all owe a huge debt to our ancestor plant breeders and the plants who decided to work with them. I mean, that's why we have wheat and squash. Corn has been domesticated for like at least 8,000 years. There are people working with plants over generations to bring us the foods we have today. And those are sacred relationships. Like, those need to be taken seriously.
It gives me chills to consider, that just sitting back and accepting that this is our birthright to be farmers. And it's a privilege, I think, too, to understand how to connect with the land in this way, because it is literally why we're here. And I think that we're society, of course, drifted into Plasticville, USA now, or honestly, the whole world just started, to get really artificial. And I'm thinking, and I'm praying, but I'm seeing that people are waking back up to the reality of our situation on this regenerative cyclical planet that needs our attention, not just for itself, because it's going to do its thing, but also for itself, but for us, for everyone.
Yeah, I'm a happier human when I do what I'm doing here. And of course, nature observation in the garden flows into self-observation. And why am I gardening? And what do I get out of it? And what are my individual relationships with certain plants and plant species and places? Wow, we're like really diving into some philosophical terrain here too. I wanted to touch again on what you had mentioned about your neighbors observing their place for a year. They say the most important gardening tool is probably a hammock, a nice lawn chair, something like that. And to hang out and watch and take notes for a year. I've also made my share of mistakes, jumping in and like, I'm going to plant trees here and there. And I think I should totally plant trees in these depressions, like in these shallow bowls, and they're going to be easy to water. Yeah, well, it's also easy for them to fill up with water and drown in the wintertime when our water table is right at the surface. So, yep, you do have to get to know your place and how it behaves throughout the seasons. And then your gardening success will improve. Also, with that, I mean, I guess the flip side of that advice is don't be afraid to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. There's no way to do this perfectly, or at least that doesn't sound like very much fun. I would rather try some experiments. Every year for me, I try something new and experimental. I've got a hoop house behind me that's full of sweet potatoes. Have I ever grown sweet potatoes here? No. Are they supposed to be easy to grow here? No. But I'll give them a try. It makes the process of gardening more interesting and exciting for me. So the observation that you do and the projects you undertake, they can be just to make life more interesting for you. Like whatever is getting you out to your garden and getting you curious and involved is really important. Your garden is a living being that is connected to all other living beings. I mean, any creature in your garden is relying on a huge ecosystem, and that includes you.
Yeah.
And to let that reality sink in, like your garden doesn't end at the fence line. There's weather coming through, there's wind coming through. The sun and the moon are all exerting influences on your garden. I mean, the sun's a big obvious one. We've just had the summer solstice. There are plants, and this is another great reason to get to know your plants, your plant families, and their life cycles. There are plants where if I plant them in June, a lot of the mustard family stuff, if I plant them right before the summer solstice, all they're going to do is send up flower stalks. They're not going to make me any tasty leaves. Mm-hmm. Darn, I'm not going to spend my garden space on those plants in June. I'm going to plant them at the end of July or in August, places where they're going to get nice and leafy as the day length gets shorter, and then I can eat them in the fall. So the great big solar roller coaster that we're on, especially at this latitude, with super long days in the summer and then super short days in the winter, that's important to know. Like your plants are paying attention to how much sunlight there is, both in terms of day length and also like, is your yard sunny or shady? Do you have a question?
Yeah, well, I was curious to see if our guests who are here, if they're local too, because I think it's so important to we're all in Woodinville for folks who are joining a little bit later. So yeah, I just think it's really important to understand our seasonality is so different from California, from even Southern Oregon. We get such long days here through this time of the year that it's very impactful. I learned my mistake of planting my leafy greens pretty late into spring, and they're all just bolting, and I'm ready to collect some seeds soon and try again in August. But exactly where we end up, our environment is, where we're growing is just it's so important. I want to learn more about the cycles of the moon and the sun, and how they influence planting. I heard a wives' tale, an old tale of planting by the new moon. Do you think that's valid? I'll have to look this up.
So there's a whole, there's biodynamic agriculture, sort of is a whole school of thought with all kinds of complexities around the heavenly influences on your garden. And for years, I've just had my big box of seed in a nice, cool, dry spot. And I just wander around my garden. And some days I'm like, I just have to go plant carrots and beets right now. Like, I must do that. And if either I do it or I don't, and then the urge passes and I'm like, where's my lettuce seed? Time to plant a whole bunch of lettuce. And then I look back on the calendar, and what I had the urge to plant is what was appropriate for that lunar phase, as in basically a waning moon for underground crops and a waxing moon for above ground crops. Is like a very general general ballpark. At least that's what has struck me in my gardening. Now, if I plant beets during a waxing moon, does it mean I'm not going to get a beet crop? No, I will still get a beet crop. Like, the plants are just going to do their best for us. There are other influences at work, and there's no way for us to do a randomized controlled experiment on this. Like, we can't plant beets in the same place at the same time at different phases of the moon. So I would say just, you can go with it. It's fine to follow your impulses with that as you're gardening. In the wild plants, and this is where, again, that nature observation comes into play, all things being equal, I see more above ground growth during a waxing moon. Like, if I'm measuring plant growth in the weeds and everything around, it does seem obvious to me that there is this growing influence during a spring waxing moon, and everybody just doesn't grow as fast during a waning moon. Like, I see that in my garden. And those are the kinds of things that nature observation will tell you. Like, this doesn't have to be theoretical. This is actually from your own observed experience. Like, I'm not making it up. I am keeping track of what's actually happening. So it kind of, it transcends the dogma. Like, I'm not going to make a school of gardening about it. Yes, there are these influences, and they're super cool to learn about. And I'm sure different plants respond differently too. But that's about what I can say about it. I haven't studied the astrology of planting too much more than beyond what I've just noticed. But it just is like, wow, the plant, these seeds, like these Brussels sprout seeds in my garden, are affected by the moon. Like, what? It is so cool to notice and feel connected to the movements of the cosmos, like through the dandelions. And I just love that. The garden is a living being connected with all other living beings. And just diving into that is pretty fun. And in that, as you notice what is actually happening, what will also probably come up is what has happened. Gardening in a place that was a temperate rainforest is different than gardening in a place that was a prairie, is different than gardening in a place that was a coral reef.
Our farm too, we're on a historic wetland, so the soil that we have here is really interesting to work with. But obviously, it works, it grows beautiful things, but the farmers need to consider how, like, we would like to do no-till, but we do very low tilling because we have to. Otherwise we can't get the things in the ground. And every soil, exactly what you were saying, it's just it's so different, and it's not a one size fits all situation by any means.
No.
And that's nice to educate people about too. I like to, like, people are like, are you guys no-till? And then I'm like, well, actually, and then I gotta bring that up.
Absolutely. Like, what's appropriate in one situation, and time management plan. It's like, sorry, ducks in the background. Why are you gardening? Where are you gardening? All these variables come into play. We were just hilling potatoes down at the neighbor's place. That's been a cabin since 1934. There have been people living there. And we're digging down, bring up soil to put on the potato hills. And lo and behold, we pull out great big old iron horseshoe that's, kind of twisted. Like, wow, there are stories here. There are big cedar stumps with the little springboard notches, from where they were logged 100+ years ago. And all that history layers into what I'm doing here now. If my goal is to grow beautiful, healthy food for myself and future generations, I also need to understand what has happened before and let that inform my garden decisions going forward. I think of gardening, especially in an observant way, as a gift to the future generations. What I'm doing here, I just say, is somebody going to be really happy that I planted that there beyond my lifetime? is somebody going to be happy I planted that there? Is somebody going to be happy that I put down that plastic mulch? Is somebody going to be happy that I added these amendments? Is somebody going to be happy? You know, and it goes on, really judging my actions by what's going to happen with the future generations. Is somebody going to be happy I planted that? And I might have told this story before, but when I visited this man up in Mount Vernon, Don Balzer, who was a nut tree grower for his whole life, and I'm walking around touring his nut farm with him, and he shows me all these beautiful tall walnut trees, all growing in a row at the edge of his property. It's like, yeah, these are going to be timber trees. I planted them close enough. I'm 83. I'm never going to see the benefit of these trees, but somebody's going to be really glad I planted them. And I was like, wow, I want to do that. So I've planted, nut trees that might last 1,000 years, 2,000 years. Like, this is probably the longest lasting impact I can make. Like, this house isn't going to be here in 1,000 years, but those trees might. Yeah. That's really awesome to think about. And
beautiful place to be, again, in your heart and your present moment. It just kind of removes the self and puts you back into that state of just like reception and the whole world being like a functioning living organism, us included, as a part of its like stewards. It's a little healthy. Was that white blood cells? I guess. But just putting ourselves behind that equation and thinking like this, everything is just momentarily here and we will cease. So understanding that you're giving back to the world and you're giving back to communities who will really need the trees and really need the soil protection that comes from these forests that have been decimated. That's just so beautiful. I'm really glad you shared that story. Wow.
Yeah, well, I'm not doing anything so fantastic or unusual myself. I'm just saying that this is an outgrowth of connecting and observing your garden. This is an outgrowth for me of connecting with a place and loving a place. Like, it just becomes easier to think in the long term because of watching natural cycles and seasons happen over and over again, and watching life and death happen over and over again, and watching the wasps eat the caterpillars off of my lettuce, and just tuning myself to reality as best I can. I am not particularly special or particularly well endowed with observation skills or anything. I just keep doing it. That's all. It's just persistence. So anybody watching this at any point in the future, this is within your capacity. This is your human birthright to pay attention and enjoy what's happening. And that can be a big shift. Like, that's been kind of painful for me to sort of be like, is it okay for me to love the world? Like, that can feel a little edgy sometimes, or a little iffy, whether that's what I've been taught as a kid, who knows why. But just be prepared for that to come up too. Like, ooh, wow. Is it easier to distract myself versus actually just watch some clouds? Like, wow, how about just watching some clouds? My life can be great when I take some time to watch some clouds. And we've just had the 4th of July, which is a bit of a tough holiday for the creatures at the farm. But
yeah, horses, goats, ducks, rabbits.
Yeah. Everybody came out of it fine, but every year at the 4th of July, I think of what I heard a permaculture teacher named Warren Brush say one time. Sorry, Warren, I hope it's okay to share this story. He talked about having one of those like fear of public speaking dreams, the like, here I am in an audience full of people, and I need to say something. And in his dream, he is providing the opening comments for Al Gore, for a speech by Al Gore. This is his dream. And he's standing up there at the podium looking at all the people and he's not sure what to say. And then finally it wells up inside of him. He knows just what to say. He says, "Real patriots build soil." Like, I want that bumper sticker. Real patriots build soil. Yeah. So, yeah.
You know, for there, my boyfriend, also kind of personal story, he works at a water treatment plant, and a lot of the people there will talk about how, you know, trying to think, they won't talk all the time about this, but it's come up, like, how are we going to preserve ourselves in the future? How are we going to preserve all this water? How are we going to, like, what are we going to do to solidify human survival, etc.? And some of them are talking about, you know, saving cans, getting guns, doing this, doing that. But then my boyfriend was like, well, have you considered planting a garden? Like, I love that, because when we think, you know, I forgot how the saying goes, but we'll realize that we can't eat money and we can't drink, you know, GDP reports. We need to, we can't eat guns. We probably shouldn't eat guns. That won't be really great. It'll help those who have iron deficiency though. But no, we can only eat food. We can only grow food with healthy soils, and it's bigger than the soils too. We can do hydroponics and all those things, but the soil isn't just, it isn't just a growing place. It's a whole process of carbon sequestration, of building minerals, building all these things that make the earth what it is.
And I feel myself personally, I am continually understanding more and more about what is true health. What is actual health of a soil? What is actual health of an ecosystem?
Yeah.
I was like, wow, I have been surrounded in my life with mostly kind of broken down, not a lot of air in the tires ecosystems. And to feel that rebuilding here on the farm, like, oh my gosh, we get more and more native pollinators every year. And the gardens get easier and easier to tend as we understand more about the ecological processes and services that help them run. So that's rewarding, and it helps us eat better for less effort. And that's kind of, I mean, that's another really unifying theme for all people who eat. It's like, all of our ancestors have wanted to get the most food for the least effort. That's kind of what it boils down to. Yeah.
Oh, that reminds me, I want to send you a really amazing documentary I saw that reminds me of the book you shared, Ancient Futures.
Oh, I love ancient. Yes. Total keystone book. Highly recommended.
Yes. I will include that also in a follow-up email to folks, resources for how to connect with the garden and where to start for folks who, there were a lot of questions in the registrations that said, how do I begin homesteading? And how do I begin? But it starts with observing. It always starts with observing.
Oh yeah. You can start homesteading no matter where you are. Just flip over a 5-gallon bucket or like pull a lawn chair out and just watch for 5 minutes a day. If 5 minutes is what you've got, do that. Just watch your landscape for 5 minutes a day. 20 minutes if you've got it. That sit spot routine has done more than anything else. And the price is right. Like, you don't need to pay anybody to do it. Nobody needs to tell you to do it. If you just want to go ahead and sit out and watch. When you show up for the world is going to show up for you. And that's the beauty of the nature observation. That's like the bigger story that also just comes back to like, oh my gosh, that's a cool bug. Like, bring in those child's passions. Bring in that curiosity and enthusiasm. You know, you can pull out some field guides, be like, wow, how do I tell a beetle apart from a bug? Why? How do I tell a wasp apart from a fly? And how are they going to be acting differently in my garden? How deeply can I observe? And just start asking yourself those questions. It should be fun. I had a great time writing my little garden journal pages with different questions peppered throughout to just help stretch the awareness, because this is something you can do on your own. And it's also something that's great to do with other people, because I am not aware of what I'm not aware of.
Yeah.
Like if I go out there, I'm always right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. Well, we have just a couple of minutes until the end. I was wondering if we could observe some of the garden or the homestead with you. Is your camera portable in this fashion today?
Maybe. Let's see. This is experimental. We'll go as far as the internet will allow, which is not very far.
Sounds good. And there's so much. What I loved about visiting is everywhere you look, there's something really special.
Yeah, I'm like, what can I show you within reach of the cord here? We've got our hoop houses, the garden in the backyard. The ducks have been hanging out under the big maple tree in the yard. Trying to think. Manure cart. It's not very exciting. Ducks,
Yes.
rabbits.
Oh, they're the ducks under the tree. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess I'll make myself small. I didn't make myself small this time, but I'll make you big here. Wow.
It's nice and green. This is really the photogenic season here.
Absolutely beautiful. What's going on in the house, the hoop
The
house?
hoop houses.
Yeah.
We've just pulled down the peas in there, a whole bunch of snap peas. And so now the tomatoes and sweet potatoes are making their way forth with the nice warm weather. So yeah, that's it. And the cherry tomatoes are rocking in that greenhouse over there. So eating lots of cherry tomatoes. The figs here are ripening. There's the figs. Again, a microclimate thing. They're planted against the stucco wall of the house and against those nice black rain barrels that just gather heat all day long. This is an awesome fig tree. It's done really well, even in cold weather here.
It looks so healthy and shiny. We're
Mhm.
getting folks in the chat saying such an amazing view. It really is.
Oh yeah. This is our childcare tree with the rope ladder going
Oh,
up it and the swing over there. So yeah.
what's the crop behind the swing in the tree?
We have Jerusalem artichokes.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, or sunchokes. They're great and we can just grow them. They're awesome kind of backup crop. Like they don't need any tending. We just go out and harvest them when we want them. So that's a pretty handy plant. And that's a perennial. I hadn't talked about perennials, but wherever possible, we try to build our food sources from perennial plants that last from year to year. This is good for your bread. I've even planted a perennial variety of wheat, and it's supposed to last from year to year. And yeah, planted that in the goat pen. So we'll see.
That's awesome. So will it be made for the goats most likely? That's fantastic.
My plan, again, this is experimental, but can I grow wheat in the pen where the goats live in the wintertime? So the goats come in and they'll hang out and they'll nibble the wheat, but they won't demolish the wheat through the winter. They'll be fertilizing the wheat. And then when the goats move out of that pen in the springtime, that's when the wheat sends up its flower stalks. We can get a harvest out of there and then put the goats back in the fall. That's the plan. We'll see what happens. But it's a fun experiment.
Yeah. Oh, that'll be really, I look forward to hearing the results of all your experiments.
It's fun. They're delicious. Oh yeah.
Yes. It's a worthy investment. That's
Mhm.
for sure.
Mhm.
Let's see.
Questions or thoughts? Here's
Yeah.
we wrap up.
If folks have any questions, we would be really glad to open the floor after, like right around now, it's 2 p.m. So for the next couple minutes, we'd love to stay on and please definitely dig into this brilliant person's brain, because Alexia has so much experience, as you mentioned, a teacher for Command Natural training program for 12 years. I didn't realize it was 12 years. That's amazing. So yeah, Alexia's brilliant. So do ask away.
We kind of got awfully philosophical with this too. It wasn't necessarily like hard and fast homestead tips, but it is, I mean, I can honestly tell you that if you sit outside and observe your place, you will become the world's expert on that place. And all the rest of gardening advice will make more sense to you, because, you know, there's gardening advice that shows up that works somewhere, but not necessarily for you. And when you know your soil and you know your sunlight patterns, you know how your water behaves in the soil, then you have a lot better chance of success with your plants.
Absolutely. There's been times through this quarantine, I felt really sad, of course, just kind of confused and lost. And the days that I kind of stayed on my phone and I was doom scrolling, getting kind of like arthritis and also hunching my shoulders, doing wonders for my brain and body. But I realized that when I was able to kind of wake up and tap out of it, I would just sit outside and start with, when I was sad, like 5 minutes to just look away from my phone, because I feel like I always want to know what's going on. But the less that Tame Impala song, the less I know, the better. But also the more I'm realizing that all I can do is control, you know, mainly with my hands. I can speak, you know, as we're doing now to the World Wide Web, but what I can really do is, all I can really affect is what's in reach of me. Observing my cat as she hangs out outside where she likes to go in the garden. Observing the sunlight is a huge thing I've wanted to do too. Yeah. Well, if I think I want to stay on and ask a couple questions too.
Okay.
We had a question.
Can I take a quick nitrogen break?
Nitrogen break.
I'll be right back.
That
Great.
sounds good. I don't know what nitrogen break means, but we'll find out. And thank you all for joining us. If at any point here, I'm going to ask another question about how to track the sunlight. We had a question in the chat about how to actually get familiar with cardinal directions. But if y'all have questions, you can feel free to unmute yourselves at this time, and you could share in the chat too.
All right, much more focused.
Love it. Nitrogen break. So I was just sharing, I had a question about in the chat about how to connect with cardinal directions better.
Oh, that's a great one. And it's something that I really encourage people to do, again, because your plants know your plants know which way north is, and they know which way south is.
I don't still.
So there are lots of ways. One is to, learn how to use a compass and figure that out. I still don't have a GPS, but I think you can just use that to just kind of always check yourself. And which way is north? You can find the North Star, which is really fun and will tell you a lot, tells you what your latitude is as well. I really recommend watching the North Star, getting to know your garden at all times of day and night, and finding that. And then constantly throughout the day, reference where north is. Here at the house, we'll often say things like, oh yeah, put that in the east compost pile. Or, oh yeah, the person at the east starts, saying grace for dinner. Or we've got to put all this stuff on the north side of this barn or whatever. So that's referencing those directions, the cardinal directions a lot, just becomes second nature. Can you put that in the east cabinet, in the west cabinet? You know, oh yeah, I think it's in the southeast corner of that room. And that starts building this really cool part of the brain that actually gives you like a little internal GPS, kind of constant awareness of three-dimensional space. So I really enjoy doing that, like find north and then reference it often.
That's awesome.
It's nice to look at shadows too. That kind of gives you 2 for 1 in terms of building an awareness of shade and sunlight. So just marking a shadow, like of a fence post or of a rock in the driveway, like just make a little mark at the tip of that shadow over the course of a day. And that will also be a good way to kind of build your sense of the movements of the heavens with something actually tangible right there in your place.
Thank you so much. That is a wonderful inspiration to start observing, start using the verbiage too. Like,
yeah,
I am personally directionally challenged, so I need to
this
start.
will help. This will help me too, but it does help. And then build a little, put 4 rocks in your garden, north, south, east, and west. Like make some little design that makes it easy to kind of just reference that.
I'm so excited to do that. Thank you. Any other questions from our wonderful audience? Thank you so much for joining us today again.
Yeah. Crystal and Zaid, just so glad you could be here.
Yeah. It's always fun to hear from you and get into these expansive places. I really loved our conversation when I came to volunteer. That was awesome.
Yep. I mean, we've just barely scratched the surface here on what is, of course, a lifetime of learning, a multi-generational lifetime of learning, really. So super grateful for all our ancestors who did know their places well enough to eat from them and survive so that we can even be here today. And yeah, it's an honor.
Absolutely. I'm so grateful for them, for everyone who chose to observe and to teach too. And I'm so glad that you were able to do that for us today. And it's through the digital world and through these new things that society is going into. It's so important to just have a reminder that we are a part of our food systems, our local food systems, our international food systems, and this beautiful, beautiful being that we call Earth. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I think that we'll probably end it for the day. And as always, we're so grateful you were here. Please join us for our next homesteading course in August. That is going to be, let me get the calendar, sorry, I had it. That is going to be August 14th. And it is going to be a fantastic series of preserving and drying your harvest as we get into fall. Can you believe it? Thank you so much for getting thank yous in the chat for your time and experience. So excited and grateful for everyone that was here. Yeah, we look forward to seeing you next month. Happy gardening.
Yeah. Thank you. See you at the farm.
Thank you.
Bye.